Before we jump in, yeah, the headline sounds wild, but Mom's worked in corporate for 13 years. I grew up around the stories. This isn't just a story for youth. It's based on real patterns people face. Names, companies, details, all changed. But if you ever work in an office, you'll recognize the truth in this. Don't miss the warning signs.
He was already drunk when he made the toast, standing up on a velvet ottoman with his platinum omega glinting in the lights, waving his glass around like he'd invented profit margins. "To the best damn team a bottom line ever loved," he slurred, before spilling veuve all over the intern's shoes. Laughter. Phones up. Applause. I stood near the window with a plastic flute of sparkling cider, the only one not clapping. The envelope in my hand felt heavier than paper had any right to be. If you're enjoying this story and want more like it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like the video. It really helps the team bring you more confessions like this. Most folks forget, but it keeps us going. The room was buzzing. One guy had gotten a new title, another flashed his Tesla key fob like a mating dance. Meanwhile, Melissa from HR kept glancing my way, fidgeting like she knew something she wasn't supposed to. When I finally stepped out for air, she followed. No words at first, just a weird silence as she led me past the break room, down the hall, into that glass-walled side office no one ever used unless someone died or got fired. She shut the door softly behind us. "There's something in yours," she said, her voice clipped and low. "A $78,500 adjustment. Line item marked correction." She handed me a copy and didn't wait for questions, just turned and left like she was afraid of what I might say. I stared at the number, then at the label. Schedule D discretionary correction. No initials, no timestamp. Just the kind of ghost entry that gets whispered about during post-layoff happy hours. My bonus letter was crisp and folded, unsigned, as if no one wanted to claim authorship. And I couldn't decide what was worse, thinking it might be a mistake, or that it wasn't. Back at my desk, I opened the payroll system. There was no Schedule D in the schema, not in the structure, not in any archived templates. I'd know. I built most of them. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the champagne-fueled noise still echoing down the hallway. I wasn't on anyone's radar for this kind of money. I hadn't closed any million-dollar deals or saved the company from a lawsuit. My year had been quiet, steady, background, which meant someone else's mistake had landed in my lap. I pulled up the Q4 final sheet from the internal shared drive. Standard layout, names, titles, departments, base, bonus, adjustments. Nothing screamed fraud, but something murmured. A tab nested beneath a column of white cells caught my eye, hidden in plain sight. It had no title, just a blank string of spaces. I clicked it open. 11 rows, not 12, 11 names, each one with a bump in their bonus allocation, tens of thousands. The biggest bump, $78,500. Highlighted as if someone had made sure it went somewhere, but forgot where. I cross-referenced the user activity log. Only 2 accounts had touched the file in the last 3 days. Mine and one tagged DFN Naitu. That account belonged to Thomas Weller, our new director of finance, hired 9 months ago. Fast talker, expensive shoes, the kind of guy who says, "Let's circle back" right before ignoring your email forever. He'd been boasting about buying a beach house in Hilton Head, said it was a pre-bonus treat to himself. I remembered because he made sure to say it in front of the junior staff like he was teaching them how the real world works. I closed the file, opened a fresh spreadsheet, my own sandbox, disconnected from the company server, pulled the last 6 backups from our quarterly bonus logic model and lined them up side by side. If someone rerouted funds, I'd find the trail. Because here's the thing about Thomas Weller. He thinks no one's watching him. And he's absolutely right, except for me. I'd seen a lot of creative accounting over the years, executives padding expense reports, phantom reimbursements for client lunches that looked suspiciously like golf weekends. But this was cleaner, subtler, like someone who didn't just bend the rules, but rewrote them in invisible ink. There was no Schedule D, not in 2019, not in the pandemic-era emergency protocols, not even buried in the legacy templates we used before the big system overhaul. I searched everything: server logs, backups, archived zip folders, nothing. But over the last 12 months, I'd noticed a change. Subtle things. Adjustments marked as equity alignment on mid-level staff who didn't even have RSUs. Deposits that didn't match any known performance tier. Reversal entries that weren't flagged to managers, just silently rerouted a day after payday. Memos from finance that read like horoscope forecasts. Vague phrases like market calibration, regional cost leveling, performance band drift. Harmless on their own, but patterns don't lie. I pulled up the internal bonus folder labeled QR Final, nothing odd on the surface, until I clicked the cell in column AA and dragged the mouse across. Beneath a wall of white cells, a tab flickered into view. It didn't have a name, just blank characters, like someone had hit the spacebar 30 times and hit save. Inside the tab were 11 rows of data: names, employee IDs, amounts. Not one of those rows was mine. And yet, line 5. Amount, $78,500, same number that appeared in my envelope. Same amount that mysteriously landed in my payout line. Except on this sheet, it was assigned to someone else entirely. Robert Langston, Associate VP of Strategy. He was the one who bought a Tesla in October and bragged about paying cash. Langston's original bonus was $42,000. This tab bumped it to $120,500, a $78,500 adjustment entry with no audit trail, no initials, no timestamp, just a formula. My stomach went cold. I checked his official record on the HR system. It still showed $120,500. No clawback, no revision. So either someone realized the overage and rerouted it, or they misfired the formula and sent it to me instead. I opened a second tab in the same document. It was labeled in all caps: Adjustment Shell Do Not Distribute. Whoever named it had the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Inside, I found formulas copy-pasted like someone had tried to replicate the logic from the original ledger, but without understanding how it actually worked. Rows had conditional gates triggering payouts based on user ID and timestamp. One line included a trigger that read, if user ID define 92 multiply 0. I froze. Defin92 was Thomas Weller's ID. The logic was simple, too simple. Every time he ran the bonus report, it applied a shadow buffer, a multiplier that added discretionary funds onto a ghost line item. Then a second gate swept the funds into the appropriate row, usually his own. But this time, something went wrong. The buffer jumped to my ID. I built a sandbox, clean, disconnected, offline. Then I recreated every version of the Q4 bonus workbook from the system backups, stripped all obfuscation macros, locked volatile fields, restored hidden data, and I ran a simulation. Every time the file executed with Thomas's user ID, a bonus buffer activated. The allocation redirected into a specific row, whichever employee ID was last selected in the filter logic. On December 14th, he ran a report to test employee bonuses. And the last ID he'd previewed? Mine. The system simply followed the path, and the money landed in my row. There was no honor in it, no gift, no promotion, just a misfire in a rigged system. One man's greed bleeding into someone else's column. But if that much could vanish with a formula, I wondered how long it had been happening, and who else had noticed, because I had the files now, and every ghost entry comes back to haunt someone. By the time the office started winding down for the holiday weekend, ugly sweaters unbuttoned, leftover shrimp drying under heat lamps, I was already 10 layers deep in the sandbox replica I'd built off the archived ledger backups. I didn't want anyone watching. Not yet. Not until I knew exactly what I was looking at. The system had always been designed for transparency, or at least that's what they preached. But no system is immune to clever fingers, especially fingers that know just enough Excel to be dangerous and just enough about human nature to assume no one's paying attention. I started with clean files, pulled directly from our Q3 backup server, untouched by Q4 edits, then layered in the Delta logs, the tiny granular differences between each save, each version, imported raw logs, restored every hidden tab I could find, stripped out macros like peeling duct tape off glass. It was tedious work, but I've always trusted math more than people. The deeper I went, the clearer the pattern became. There it was again. Q4 margin credit. tucked between two legitimate bonus inputs like a hitchhiker in a crowded van. It shouldn't have been there. We didn't even have a margin-based bonus system, not for non-sales employees. But I traced it. Line by line, the cell wasn't just static. It was a formula. Specifically, if user ID DFN92 multipla by J. I stared at that cell for a full minute. User ID DFN92 Thomas Weller, Director of Finance, newly hired, newly rich, newly careless. The logic was primitive, almost insulting. If the sheet was executed by Thomas, the system added a custom multiplier plus an adjustment buffer into a dummy field. From there, it looked like it got swept into the main allocation tab, hidden from the dashboard, masked as a rounding difference or back-end comp correction. Except, something had gone wrong. When I checked the execution logs from the day bonuses were finalized, the user ID that last ran the formula wasn't Thomas's. It was mine. He'd been filtering bonus ranges earlier that morning, probably scanning how his own inflated numbers looked, and left my name in the preview field before executing the final compile. The system didn't care. It just followed the rule. It pushed the plus XX buffer straight into my bonus line, a perfect crime tripped by a sloppy preview. It was like watching someone rig a vending machine only to get smacked in the face by the free Snickers they weren't expecting. I kept digging. Every bonus run he'd executed since Q1 had this buffer buried in it, sometimes small, like $2,800 here, $5,000 there. Other times it ballooned. Q2 had a market volatility offset that looked suspiciously like a $42,000 check to himself, all buried in vague audit notes with just enough plausible deniability to skate through quarterly reviews. And no one had questioned it, because he knew HR didn't have eyes on formulas. He knew legal wouldn't look unless there was a complaint. And he knew the rest of the team was too burned out to scan cell references in a workbook with 40 tabs and more passwords than common sense. I ran the data again, cross-referenced payout history, highlighted anomalies, charted behavioral markers, and access logs. The pattern was surgical. Until me. I was the variable he hadn't accounted for. So I started preserving every version, every log, every time-stamped access event. I exported a version control report and hashed the backups into an encrypted vault with timed access only. The files lived on a flash drive the size of a paperclip, but the weight of what they held, that was nuclear. I wasn't angry. I wasn't planning revenge. I was just waiting, quietly, for the system to do what it always does when someone gets greedy. Trigger its own defense mechanisms. One misfire, one audit ping, one HR question, and the whole damn formula collapses. The rooftop was dripping in excess, string lights like champagne halos, imported cheeses sweating under heat lamps, and a jazz trio playing some watered-down version of Moondance no one asked for. He stood center stage, flanked by partners and sycophants, holding a crystal flute like it was a royal scepter. The wind caught his tie just enough to make it look cinematic. Of course it did. To a year of grit, he said, and a team that delivered under pressure. People actually cheered. Some clapped like it was muscle memory, others because they just checked their deposit notifications and saw enough zeros to justify it. And then there were a few, new hires mostly, who looked around like they were still trying to learn what exactly they'd accomplished. It didn't matter. Everyone smiled anyway. He raised his glass higher. To transparency, he said. To shared success. I didn't drink, just stood in the back, shoulder to the wall, coat zipped halfway like I might leave early, which I would. I watched him laugh, watched him glow under the canopy of corporate theater, and all I could think about was that email he'd sent Tuesday morning at 6:18 a.m. Let's lock the bonus file by Friday. Audits start next month. Keep versions clean. Versions clean, not accurate, not reviewed, not compliant, just clean. Too late for that. I'd already exported 6 weeks of version histories, every delta, every cell change, every user ID, and every time someone tried to overwrite the logs. There was a silent war embedded in those spreadsheets. Edits hidden inside nested IF statements, overwritten tags, reused row IDs that bypassed approval locks. Most people wouldn't have spotted it, but I'd built the structure they corrupted. I knew where the bones were buried, including the timestamp mismatch. The final bonus file, the one approved by the compensation committee, stamped 11:03 p.m. Thursday night. But the version that went to payroll, compiled at 1:17 a.m. Friday morning by Thomas. He'd run the sheet alone, after everyone had signed off, and he'd tried to cover the overwrite by renaming it with a cleaner file name and backdating the save. But even file names bleed if you cut them right. One of the file properties, buried 3 menus deep, still held the actual last modified flag, and the hash key of that file didn't match the hash on the signed version in our compliance archive. He toasted again, laughing about how next year we'd aim higher and maybe upgrade the lounge, as if the $60,000 in seafood hadn't already hit some obscene cap. His watch flashed again. Platinum, with a deep blue dial, Omega Constellation, limited edition. I remember the day he wore it into finance like it was no big deal. It was a big deal. That thing cost more than my first car. He thought he'd buried everything under numbers, that no one would think twice about a few $1,000s of band compression adjustment or tier realignment. But greed always slips, especially when it doesn't believe in witnesses. I left before the cake came out, walked back to my office while they passed around flutes and selfies and dropped the escrow drive into a secure vault system I'd used once before, years ago, for a much quieter kind of mess. Timed access only, hash verified, trigger set for legal ping, compliance query, or unapproved payroll overwrite. No one knew it existed. No one needed to. Not yet. Because he thought he'd finished the story. He had no idea I'd been writing the appendix. It came in like the most disasters do around here, through a 3-line Slack message no one wanted to open. Hey, HR, can we get clarification on one outlier? $78,500 marked as correction with no initiating form. Compliance didn't sound alarmed. Not yet. They never do at first. It's always phrased like a routine double check, like, this probably isn't a big deal, but. That but had been looping in my head for a week. The morning after the rooftop party, I watched the deposit hit my account and didn't touch it. Just left it there. The financial equivalent of walking past a duffel bag full of cash and knowing damn well the ink pack inside is about to blow. HR responded to compliance with one of those time buyer phrases. We'll look into it and follow up shortly. Translation. We're panicking. They didn't reach out to me directly at first. I wasn't on the CC line, but I have alerts on that folder structure. Always have. Within 15 minutes, I saw the doc get forwarded to legal. The thread split in two, one direction chasing paper trails, the other sprinting toward PR mode damage control. My name wasn't the problem. Not anymore. They knew I hadn't initiated it. The issue was the routing path. There wasn't one. No signature, no initiation timestamp, no form filed under our documented comp procedures. Just a number and a note. Schedule D, discretionary correction. No one had ever defined what that meant because it wasn't supposed to exist. Legal flagged the entire payout file. Within 20 minutes, I watched version V33 final.xlsx get pulled into the audit tool with the label unclear authorship. The system couldn't trace who had created it. I could, but I didn't volunteer. Instead, Thomas decided to speak up. Said he'd copied forward a prior template for ease of use. Said maybe HR had left some fields in accidentally. Said maybe someone pushed the file live prematurely. Classic triple blame deflection. He even tried to make it sound noble, like he was trying to speed up payroll processing to get folks paid before the holiday. I didn't respond in real time, just waited, let them spin. Then I forwarded a clean readout, zero commentary, just rows and formulas. Highlighted the execution log, time-stamped, cell-by-cell trace. No opinions, no assumptions, just math. My message went out at 2:11 p.m. 2 minutes later, legal replied, "Let's bring my name in for clarification." Clarification. That word again, wrapped in professionalism, dipped in panic. HR added a meeting to my calendar. No subject, just a location and 2 names. General Counsel, Director of Risk Oversight. And one line in the invite. Please bring your version of the Q4 file, if available. It was. Of course it was. Every version was. In triplicate, time-stamped, hashed, secured, and mirrored across 3 private vaults. Because I don't push files live prematurely. And I don't need to raise my voice. I just wait for everyone else to realize they've been whispering lies into a megaphone. The door closed with a hush, like a theater curtain. No introductions, no handshakes, just the rustle of folders and the quiet hum of the vent in the ceiling. She didn't smile, just gestured to the chair across from her and slid a thick stack of paper toward me like a slow-dealt hand of bad poker. Label on the top. Q4 payout ledger, final revisions. The general counsel was known for two things: an allergy to small talk and a memory that could destroy careers. She didn't waste time. She tapped one line with a manicured nail: my name, my department, my bonus total with the $78,500 correction, tagged like an accidental tattoo. Did you request this? She asked. No. Did you notice it before disbursement? I shook my head once. She didn't blink, just flipped the page like a surgeon opening a rib cage. This folder was different, thinner, tighter. It held three things: print logs, access credentials, and screen captures. One shot showed Thomas logged into the bonus workbook at 1:17 a.m. Another showed the formula field before and after. A third showed a user filter applied to my name before the buffer executed. It was clinical, brutal, impossible to deny. He used your row as a buffer, she said flatly. He'd been injecting adjustments under his ID for months, but this time the gate fired into your line, and now he's trying to claw it back without triggering an audit. I didn't nod. I didn't ask questions. I just listened. There was no apology, no surprise, just a long pause before she reached into her bag and pulled out a new folder, blue this time. Non-disclosure agreement, she said. Draft. She didn't say hush money. She didn't have to. The first page was standard: confidentiality around bonus discrepancies, non-disparagement, mutual release of claims. Page 2 was where it got interesting. Advisory retainer, Tier 3 confidential was the heading. Below it, a pre-written offer, a monthly retainer for ongoing consultation in ledger compliance and operational continuity. It was neat, polished, too fast to be recent. They'd known this might happen. They were just hoping it wouldn't be me. I flipped through without reacting. They'd buried the leverage clause at the bottom, buried it deep, almost lazy. Section 9B, retainer contingent upon mutual execution, valid through Q3 FY+1, subject to renewal based on departmental need. Departmental need. Cute. I didn't sign. Not then. Instead, I closed the folder slowly and placed it in my bag. She didn't stop me. Didn't ask what I thought, didn't say when I needed to respond. Because she already knew. The board wouldn't want scandal, the partners wouldn't want headlines, and Thomas sure as hell didn't want to explain why his Omega was funded through a misfire and a spreadsheet. I stood up. She didn't. I opened the door. Just before stepping out, I turned back and said the only thing I'd said all meeting. I'll return my version tomorrow, with comments. Because if they wanted silence, they were going to pay for it. But on my terms. I spent the evening in silence, laptop open, soft jazz humming in the background while the city blinked through my window. The original NDA sat untouched in my inbox like an unanswered dare. I didn't touch it. I rewrote it from scratch. There were no threats, no bluffs, just precision. My version was 6 pages, not 14. No fluff about mutual respect or boilerplate apologies. Just terms. A monthly retainer, automatically renewable for 18 months. Title: Operational Risk Consultant, Tier 3 Confidential, reporting only to General Counsel. Departmental neutrality guaranteed. I'd act as a failsafe, not a subordinate. Clause 4 made it airtight. Continuity oversight could not be revoked or reassigned without written mutual consent, which meant they couldn't quietly ghost me once the storm passed. Access logs? Full read, write clearance to all financial ledger revisions and archive trails. Redundancy across both primary and secondary payroll systems. Quarterly briefings, no surprises, no hidden tabs, and the overage, the $78,500, that stayed. Classified as a corrective windfall, one-time retention award due to systemic ledger malfunction under new administration. No clawback, no retroactive reclassification. They wanted silence. I wanted infrastructure. I submitted the revisions the next morning before 9 a.m. By 9:17, legal replied, accepted, fully executed. Welcome aboard. No edits, no counterpoints, just quiet surrender. And in the same hour, an internal memo went out. Not company-wide, just to upper finance and risk. The director of finance, Thomas Weller, would be suspended from active ledger duty pending retraining on updated compliance procedures. He wasn't fired. Of course not. They couldn't afford that kind of noise, not with investors sniffing around for Q1 growth stories and performance bonuses landing like trophies. But his edit access? Gone. Temporarily, they said. Just a precaution. Permanently, I knew. Because the moment someone else holds the keys to your formula, your fraud becomes a lesson plan. They scheduled our meeting that afternoon, just him and me. HR didn't come. Legal didn't hover. Just a private conference room and a copy of the training deck I'd already begun to outline. One I'd title, "When You Play with Cells, Expect to Get Cut." It wasn't about revenge, it was about resetting the hierarchy. I didn't need him fired. I needed him seated across from me, learning the difference between a spreadsheet and a snare. He showed up 10 minutes early, like someone told him punctuality might soften the humiliation. Wrinkled shirt, no tie. The platinum omega still on his wrist. Less a statement now, more a reminder. His smile was forced, if you could even call it that. Just a curl of the lips with no heat behind it. "Guess I owe you a drink," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. I didn't acknowledge it. Didn't need to. Instead, I turned the monitor toward him, opened the file, and waited for him to sit. Slide 1 filled the screen in bold black text. Bonus Logic 101, if you can't explain the formula, don't touch it. He gave a weak exhale that was supposed to pass for a laugh. I clicked to slide 2 and started. There was no gloating, no sarcasm, just structure. Just process, the kind of clarity he never thought he'd be subjected to. We covered proper ledger architecture, internal approval chains, version control protocols. I showed him how metadata should be tracked, when logs should be generated automatically versus manually, and why every bonus entry, no matter how discretionary, had to be tethered to a verifiable origin. He didn't interrupt. Not once. Just took notes like a student hoping to pass a class he never studied for. I paused a few times, not for dramatic effect, but to let the silence hang. Because there's something about silence that teaches harder than words ever could. At one point, I watched him write down approval hierarchy threshold logic, then erase it and rewrite it slower, like he was making sure it sank in this time. Near the end, I walked him through the audit tags embedded in each ledger file and how deviations trigger flagging, even if the surface data looks clean. I didn't tell him I'd known about his trick for weeks. He knew. He also knew it was over. Slide after slide, we moved through the wreckage he'd created like a cautionary tale. I explained how to structure bonus tables to withstand peer review and how correction entries required an escalation flag across 3 systems, not just one. He scribbled that down too. The final slide was just one line. Never copy forward what you can't reverse. I clicked save and closed the file. He stood up slowly, still not looking at me directly. The tension in his jaw had shifted from arrogance to something closer to acceptance. "I'll review all of this," he said. I nodded once. Not as permission, just acknowledgement. He left the room quieter than he entered. Outside, the office hummed with the noise of mid-quarter deadlines and oblivious chatter. No one else knew what just happened. No one else had to. By the end of the day, my new title went live on the org chart. Operational Risk Consultant, different department, no dotted lines, no oversight, just access. They folded me back into the bonus pool without announcement. No ceremony, no toast, but the ledger knew. And this time, every line knew who was watching. Same conference room, same catered hors d'oeuvres, same overpriced champagne poured into plastic flutes pretending to be crystal. The string lights were dimmer this time, like someone had finally realized not every bonus cycle needs to feel like a wedding reception. Still, the smiles were wide, the applause automatic, and the envelopes crisp. Mine had my name embossed this time. That was new. I didn't open it right away. I just held it in my lap while the new head of HR gave the same speech recycled from last quarter. Resilience, dedication, outperforming in a turbulent market. I'd heard it all before. Hell, I could have delivered it better. The only thing that had changed was who stood where. Across the room, near the exit, Thomas stood half-shadowed. Same watch, less shine. He wasn't clapping, just watching the whole thing unfold like a man who no longer trusts the house he helped build. When the applause died down, I opened the envelope. 2 lines: advisory retainer, $18,500, performance share, $60,000, no surprises, no inflation, no Schedule D, just numbers that belonged exactly where they landed. HR caught my eye again. She didn't flinch this time. No side offices, no whispered corrections. Just a nod, something closer to respect than fear. She knew. They all knew. Across the table, someone joked about upgrading from a Peloton to a full home gym. Someone else made a crack about booking Cabo early this year. People laughed like nothing had ever cracked beneath the surface, and for most of them, nothing had. But cracks don't need to be seen to be felt. I stood, lifted my glass, not for a toast, just to acknowledge I'd been there. No smile, no speech, just a quiet exit. The hallway felt colder than it should have, like the air itself had reset. My shoes echoed too loudly on the tile, but I didn't slow down. By the time the rest of the room remembered I was gone, I'd already cleared the parking lot. Some stories don't need punctuation, just space to breathe. The $78,500, it was never a mistake. It was a signal, misrouted maybe, but never meaningless. Sometimes value reveals itself not in what you take, but in what you correct. And sometimes the cleanest revenge is just getting paid to fix the mess someone else thought no one would see.